Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Sports Bazaar with me, Mick Malloy, and of course, Titus O'Reilly. Titus, you've delivered so far. You've blown me away with all the hoo-ha surrounding the 1936 Berlin Olympics,
Yes.
but we finally get to the Olymps. We did the opening ceremony.
Yep.
We've done the build-up, but now it all takes place. Does it deliver?
It totally delivers, and there's a lot of myths that come out of the Berlin Olympics, and the biggest one is not myth in terms of himself, Jesse Owens, who wins the African-American track star,
Yes.
who wins 4 gold medals.
Yeah.
There's a lot of myths about how that was perceived at the time and what it meant and what other people thought of it and whether Hitler snubbed him. So we're going to get into all of that today. So when they were coming, one of the things Hitler, of course, wanted was to show Aryan supremacy.
Yeah.
That the white man was better than a black man or any other race. And Jesse Owens was a real finger in the eye to all
No, that wasn't going to script, was it?
It wasn't. And it's quite interesting how it all goes. But also on top of that is it's more complicated than just Owens versus Hitler as it's things. So, for instance, people forget in 1936, the United States, I mean, of course, now they don't have any racial problems. But in 1936, it wasn't exactly America. The United States was not exactly a place that was easy going for African Americans.
Correct.
So to give you an idea, of the US Olympic team at the 36 Olympics, there were 312 athletes.
Yes.
Only 18 were African Americans out of that 312. But they earned 14 medals, 8 of them gold, which was 1/4 of the US medal count. So they massively overperformed. In many cases, the African Americans weren't even allowed to participate in the trials to get in. So we've talked a lot about how Berlin wouldn't let Jews compete to get on teams.
Yeah.
Back in America, certain things like athletics, where Jesse Owens had come through, did allow African Americans to try and make the team and make the team.
Yes.
But many others didn't let them even try because they weren't integrated. So the certain sports, such as basketball, they hadn't integrated. So
unbelievable.
So there was no way African Americans could even try out for the Olympics.
And this went on for a long time. Muhammad Ali famously, do you remember, tossed his gold medal into a river when he got home because he was still not allowed to dine in a restaurant with white diners. So
exactly.
America can't get too smug.
And they kind of knew it at the time. That's one of the reasons they were very hesitant about everyone criticising Hitler, because this is before, everyone knew the full extent of the Holocaust or stuff. So they were more like, well, hang on, we have rules saying you can't come into these shops.
Yeah.
Are we going to really get all angry at the Nazis if they choose the Jewish people?
That's right. You can't play on this golf course.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't join this country club.
So to give you an idea, though, like, for example, in basketball, this was the 36 Olympics was the first time basketball was an official event.
Yes.
And one thing that was humorous about it is the Germans didn't know really what basketball was because it was invented in America. So they were kind of like, when they were told to set up a basketball court, they were like, okay. So they actually set it up as an outdoor facility,
Right.
with a grass court.
With a grass court? I've never seen a grass court.
They didn't know it was. They didn't know. They just got sent the dimensions.
That's hilarious.
And they set it up.
It's outdoor in a field.
Yeah,
so,
they thought basketball would be that. They didn't know it was a gym and it was on a hardwood floor, right? So for the gold medal match, Team USA played Team Canada, and there was torrential downpour.
Oh, they're playing in mud.
They're playing literally in mud. 1,000 spectators show up, and it's so full of mud that it's impossible to dribble. So it's completely impossible to dribble.
So it's impossible to dribble.
If
The
you
ball's
bounce,
just
it just sticks. So the players had to make do by just really passing the
like
ball.
Netball.
Like netball,
passing the ball around.
and shooting from really far out because you can't really, it's hard to get
Another
it into
three-point attempt.
I was going to say hard to get in the paint, but it's hard to get in the mud. And so what happened was it ended up 19-8 with the US winning.
That was the final score.
That was the final
That is
score.
the lowest scoring basketball
absolutely.
match of all time.
Well, the first ever basketball match finished 1-0.
I beg your pardon?
The first ever basketball match ever held was 1-0.
Okay, what was the rule that
There
needed
were
to be
no
changed?
rules because it was a PE teacher. We'll do this at some point. But James Naismith, who's actually Canadian, He was in an American high school that he was told by the principal, invent a game to keep the boys busy in winter. So he just put 2 peach baskets up at the end of each end of a gym and just said the idea is to shoot it in. And then he hadn't invented the rules yet, so they all clobber each other. It ends in with like a broken arm, broken collarbone, several black eyes, and a kid knocked unconscious, and they all go, "We love this."
This is the origin of most team sports.
Yeah,
right.
It just
make it up.
Yeah, so this is it was pretty new. Yeah, it was pretty new with this. So the fact is that no African American players managed to play in that game at all. So they weren't even allowed in the Olympics in basketball. They just didn't. In fact, it took to 1948 for the first African American to play basketball in the Olympics for America, which was a long time. And that was still seen as a bit of a token. It took till 1936 games for Team USA to have more black players than white players in basketball, which the opposite of today.
Yeah.
Like now you look at it and it just seems so strange. Jesse Owens, though, was born in Alabama, and he found himself, before he got over to Berlin, he managed to make it because he was so good, and athletics had broken the colour barrier and did let people who are African-American compete. He found that when he played for he ran for Ohio State University.
Yes.
And when the team travelled south to play, he wasn't allowed to go. So they just kept the African Americans home, including Jesse Owens. So he's competing over in Berlin, yet in parts of America he isn't allowed to compete. So they had a very interesting view of the Nazis because they were kind of like, we're being treated as well, if not better, because remember they're on their good behaviour as well.
Yes.
So he found that very odd that he wasn't allowed to do that. Now, the other thing people never mention is they always mention Jesse Owens, but they don't mention the other African Americans who are over there, who all did really well.
Yep.
Another one in the 100 metres, where Jesse Owens won gold. His teammate, who's African American, Ralph Metcalfe, finished just 1/10 of a second behind him, won silver.
Yep.
So this was dominating in front of Hitler.
Yep.
They are just dominating in front of him.
He would have seen the funny side.
Yeah, Hitler was always known for his great sense of humour. Just always known for it.
Yeah.
Now, Mac Robinson in the 200 metres, Mac Robinson, an African-American teammate, came second by 4/10 of a second behind Owens and got silver.
Yep.
So once again dominating. Now, his younger brother, Mac Robinson's younger brother, his name was Jackie. And Jackie Robinson would go on to be the one who broke the colour barrier in baseball.
Oh, of course.
First ever.
Yes.
So people have heard of Jackie Robinson. Well, his brother won silver at the Olympics too, so a very talented family. And so all of this was sort of this huge impact. They also dominated in the 4x100 relay, which is another one that he also won gold in. So this was this huge African American explosion of talent for the first time ever, happening right in front of Hitler. Right, so Owens was the main star. He won 4 gold medals in the 100 and 200 metres, the long jump, and the 4x100 metre relay. People don't know this about him, but one thing he wasn't good at was he was a terrible chaperone. Because Louis Zamperini, who was a long-distance runner for the United States, he said Owens was a prince of a guy, a sweet, humble man, but one night was delegated to act as his chaperone because Zamperini said, by his own admission, he was frisky.
and they were allowed be trusted on his own.
Yeah, and he was like, I just want to go out. And so Jesse Owens said, all right, I'll go with you. Yeah, because he didn't want to go out alone. And Owens wasn't too good as a chaperone because Zamperini discovered when you order beer in Germany, they're the huge steins.
The steins, God, I love them.
Yeah, and so he got quite drunk, and later in the night, Zamperini scaled a flagpole near the Reichstag to get a Nazi's flag as a souvenir. And when armed guards gathered below him, he shouted the only German word he knew, which was beer.
That's a good night out.
Yeah, so anyway, the big thing
That's a good night out in Berlin.
Yeah, good night out in, with stormtroopers telling you to get down the flagpole. They didn't arrest him, though, because they didn't want to offend anyone at this point. Now, when Jesse Owens competes in this huge Olympic stadium that they built with 100,000 people there, Hitler is there, and he is hoping to see the Germans dominate in the athletics, right? And, of course, the 100 metres, the glamour event, Jesse Owens wins, and the crowd as a whole go ballistic and start chanting, Jesse, Jesse.
Yes.
And Hitler doesn't like this at all.
No.
He's not, he's not happy that the German hasn't won, but secondly, to have the crowd chanting an African American.
Is it largely German crowd?
Largely German. I mean, there's lots of.
It shows you intrinsically not racist.
Well, this is the thing. They were sort of like there was just very different views to it all. Now, the thing about this is, it's often has been made that Hitler didn't shake Owens' hand, and that this was a snub after we won gold.
Yes.
You know, and the thing is, it wasn't really. But this isn't to excuse Hitler, but it was different to what people think. The Fuhrer had received the winners of the women's javelin on the first day.
Yes.
Who were German, who had won, the women's javelin gold medalist. And the IOC said to him, that breaks protocol for you to actually do that. But secondly, if you're going to do that, you have to shake every gold medalist's hand.
Yes.
And Hitler goes, well, I'm not doing that.
Right.
He was very against that. So he had stopped well before Jesse Owens won.
Right.
So he didn't snub Jesse.
He didn't single out Jesse Owens
in that particular case. Now, that said, when Jesse becomes truly, even in Berlin and in Germany, a real hero and a nationwide hero and an international hero because of radio and all the media the Nazis are pumping out, Hitler is said by the youth leader of the Hitler Youth, Baldur von Streik, why don't you have a picture taken with him because it would look good? And Hitler said the Americans should be ashamed of letting Negroes win their medals. I'm not shaking hands with this Negro. So that just reiterates.
You can read into that what you like.
Just reiterating that Hitler was not a nice guy in any way, shape.
Just to underline the point.
So he didn't like it. Hitler's view and the Nazi view, the way because the problem African American and any black athlete had is if they lost, it proved white men were superior.
Yes.
But if they won, it proved that in some way they were not human. They were more like an animal, and that was why they could beat the white man.
So we would just support any prejudice you have.
That's what the Nazis would say. So the Nazis said that Hitler believed that the reason African Americans shouldn't be able to compete is not because it was because he saw them not as they were inferior, but he said that they're actually not really human. And so it's an unfair comparison. He used to say, people whose forefathers came from the jungle are primitive, more athletically built than civilized white people. They're not a fair competition, and thus they should be excluded from future games and other sporting competitions. So that was the way they justified in their minds. So
a bit of sore loser about.
Oh, just a little bit,
just a touch,
just a little bit. So, but because people often wonder how did the Nazis justify what they were seeing in front of them, where the African Americans were trouncing them in quite a few events. How did they make square the circle that they were the superior race? So they break up all this sort of nonsense was what they did. The thing is, Jesse Owens, though, the problem was he was so good that, and radio spread his name so far and wide that he just instantly becomes this huge hero.
We still know him today. That's how huge he is. There aren't many Olympic heroes that you hear the name and you know.
Yes, that's right. But the Germans did not take this well. The foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, he actually complained to the daughter of the US ambassador that America was cheating by bringing black athletes over, who he described as non-humans to her.
Yes.
So they were very on that thing. And Goebbels wrote in his diary, white humanity should be ashamed when Jesse Owens won 4 medals. So they were putting on a nice face publicly in some ways, but in other ways they were really losing.
Furious. They're ropeable.
Just to give you an idea, though, the American assistant track coach, Dean Cromwell, said that the black athletes had an advantage. So this is the American assistant track coach. He said it was not that long ago that his ability to spring and jump was a life and death matter for him in the jungle.
Oh, wow.
So the prejudices are so, just overt but deep the Nazis were not alone in it, right? It was like kind of this, and this is what Owens
mate,
is.
you said that out loud.
I know, and this is what Owens is. Why he is a symbol now, because I don't think people get what he was up against, right? Like that these people, powerful people, are, even on his own side, are saying these things about him. Now, the interesting thing is, and I think this is probably one of the best things written about it at the time, is Lewis Lyons, who's a columnist for the Boston Globe, and he was a white American journalist. He was one of the few people who actually wrote in his column that, pointing out the hypocrisy and stupidity of all these arguments, he said, the best the Nazis have been able to do with the racial problem created by Jesse Owens and co. is to theorise that these represent a race of American helots more akin to the panther and the jackrabbit than to their Aryan competitors. This is a view that conveniently disregards the fact that one of these coloured athletes is a Phi Beta Kappa scholarship man, one is in medical school, one a law student, and the others are meeting the requirements of American college life.
There you go.
So he was the good rejoinder to point out, you know what? All these guys are actually smarter than the idea they're just
explain
these
that.
the idea they're just sort of these like physical beasts is just like nonsense. Yeah. Now Owens, after winning the 100 and 200 metres and becoming a hero already, he then enters the long jump, and he's up against a German athlete called Karl Luz Long. And Luz is his nickname. Now, Long is heavily favoured to win this easily. And Owens is having difficulty landing an official jump. He keeps getting called for a foul of taking off too late.
Sure.
And Long thinks that the German coaches are favouring him and trying to intentionally disqualify Owens because it was like Hitler was so unhappy of seeing him already win 2 gold medals and wanted the German to beat him in this. Yeah. So what Long did is Long didn't really like this. So he says goes up to Owens and says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a jump, but I'm going to drop a towel just before the foul line, like a good, half a foot before the foul line. Yeah. And you and I will take off both together from where the towel is, not the foul line. So it's impossible. So it'll be fair, but it's also impossible for them to call either you or I a foul, like call you a foul. Incredible. Because we'll be going before, which is an amazing bit of sportsmanship, right? Yeah. And so they go on and eventually they start beating Olympic records against each other. Yeah. So they go back and forth. But eventually Jesse Owens sets a record of 8.06 metres, which took until 1968 for someone to break again. Wow. Owens wins his 3rd gold medal. And Owens and Long, after the national anthem was played, they leave the field arm in arm, even though Long's come second and got silver. And this gesture gets Long in trouble. A short time after, he gets a visit from a representative, the deputy Fuhrer Rudolf Hess, who tells him that he should never again dare to embrace a Negro. Despite this, Owens and Long go back to Long's room afterwards and stay up talking all night for 2 hours.
That's a great story.
And they find out that they're the same age. They've got very similar backgrounds. They're both very uncertain about what's going to happen in the world coming up. And they just find that they're just two young men who don't know what's going on. And Owens later said, it took a lot of courage for Long to befriend me in front of Hitler. You can melt down all the medals and cups I have, and they wouldn't be a plating on the 24-carat friendship I felt for Long at that moment.
I'm getting quite emotional. That is insane.
Insane. Right in
the antidote to all the bullshit.
Yeah.
Is
2 young guys who just...
who fierce competitors, best in the business. Jeez.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing.
Wonderful.
And also Long's just been beaten by Owens and could have left him to probably get disqualified.
Yeah.
And instead, he said, I'll help you out. Like, let's beat them at the game.
Yeah.
And then they walk off together. He gets told off. He still goes and chats to him all night.
Brilliant.
Now, along with this, in the last race...
That should be a movie.
This is where...
You could do... That story alone should be the basis of a sporting film.
Yeah.
With all the rest becoming secondary noise and background. And go, that's the war story.
Yeah.
To me, that's unbelievable.
Because you've got all these pricks, and I'm sorry to call the Nazis pricks. I know it's a harsh call, but I'm going to stand by it.
I'll allow it.
I'm going to stand by it. But you got them and you got these Olympic Committee members and that all bending over backwards for money and power and to feather their own nest.
Have shown their own values.
And then you got these two who are just showing that most people don't want that nonsense, that they were willing to stand up to them all. After the long jump event, he'd won 3 individuals, Jesse Owens, and it's time for the relay. And 2 American runners, Sam Stoller and Marty Glickman, are meant to be running. But the coach comes in and says, I'm dropping you 2 and putting Owens and Metcalf in. Right. Now, some people say this is because the Germans were running their best and he thought, well, Owens and Metcalf are very good. And it's true. But a lot of other people think that it's because Sam Stoller and Marty Glickman were Jewish and the Americans didn't want to embarrass Hitler by running Jewish athletes.
We'd rather embarrass them with our
African Americans than with the Jewish ones.
Jewish guys.
Now, some people say they don't think that's true, that it was just simply because that Jesse and Owens and Metcalf were just in such great form that it was the sensible move, but others not. And Glickman never forgave the Americans for doing it. He described that Jesse spoke up and said, Coach, I've already won my 3 gold medals. I'm tired. I've had it. Let Marty and Sam run. They deserve it. But Coach Cromwell, who's the coach, pointed his finger at Owens and said, you'll do as you're told. And Glickman said later, in those days, black athletes did just do as they were told. So that was sort of the thing. Now, the thing about this is Owens is now remembered, and we talk about we know him, and is this symbol of a beacon of hope and all this sort of stuff. At the time, this is not how it was perceived in America or anywhere else.
No.
So we are retrofit what our values are onto it. At the time, Owens was 22 years old. He returned to New York did get a ticker tape parade. But then he was forced to ride in the freight elevator to a reception in his honour at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel.
Jeez.
Following the Olympics, all athletes for the Americans were invited to the White House to be received by the president, except for the African American athletes.
Jesus.
They're not invited. So all the white athletes are invited. So this was under FDR, under Roosevelt. And it led Owens to say...
I understand it in this... Well, I don't understand it, but the southern states, you don't expect much better. But for the White House...
Well, Roosevelt was in an election year and knew he needed southern whites.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
That doesn't make it all right. That's just why he did it.
No, that's the explanation.
And it led to Owens saying, Hitler didn't snub me. It was Roosevelt who snubbed me. The president didn't even send me a telegram. So this idea that people pat themselves on the back, no black athlete received brand deals when they returned, but most of the white athletes who'd won gold medals did. Jesse Owens was sort of forced to hang up his running shoes because they were saying he had to start running exhibition matches for money to feed his family because he had no money. And then they said, well, you can't be an amateur athlete or go to the Olympics again. So he's 23 and stopped. That's why he stopped. And he opened up a dry cleaners and appeared at vaudeville shows and nightclubs to earn any money he could. And 3 years after the Olympic Games, he was bankrupt. It wasn't until the 1950s, 20 years later, that he finally got some financial security as a public relations firm he owned and becoming a public speaker. So this idea that he was like kind of welcomed home as this hero who triumphed over Hitler is a myth that people tell themselves today. Yeah. It didn't happen at all. Now, back in America, in Berlin while the Olympics are still going, there was an American decathlete called Glenn Morris who was one of the favourites to win, and he would win gold in the decathlon in Berlin. And he broke his own world record, a huge score in the decathlon. Yeah. And then he was so good and graceful and powerful that Adolf Hitler basically falls in love with him.
Jesus.
He was also white, of course.
Yeah.
He watched every time Morris competed. Hitler was in his seat, glued, and offered Morris $50,000 to stay in Germany and make movies after the Olympics.
Who's he represent?
He's the United States.
United States.
Glenn Morris from the United States.
Wow.
And Hitler just liked the way he moved and everything.
Crikey. That'd be unnerving.
Now, one thing is... Lenny...
Hey, Morris, Hitler really likes you.
Hitler really, really likes you. Now, Leni Riefenstahl, the movie maker, she was filming and she becomes enthralled with Morris as well. And she described in her biography, "We looked at one another," this is at the Olympic Stadium after he wins gold, "we both seemed transfixed. It was an incredible moment and I've never experienced anything like it." She then says that after the medal ceremony, Morris grabbed me in his arms, tore off my blouse and kissed my breasts right in the middle of the stadium in front of 100,000 spectators. A lunatic, I thought. Now, this has been disproven to be true. They definitely had an affair. But this idea that he ripped her blouse off in front of everyone, which she wrote in her biography.
You've had this fact checked?
That people have gone back and checked it and gone, no, it just didn't happen. But he was presented his gold medal by Eva Braun out of Hitler's Mistress. So, anyway, she said she was in love with him.
He's got a swingers type of feel.
Yeah, really weird. She was in love with him, and he once said later in his life, he told his brother Jack that he regretted not staying in Germany with her. The reason Leni Riefenstahl broke up with him and didn't stay with him is she got his handwriting tested by a sort of a psychic, and the psychic said the vibes weren't good. So they're all
the vibes
nuts.
weren't good. What, for someone who's in bed with the Nazis? That's a hard marker.
Yeah, tough marker.
Oh, what, the signs weren't good. It was a bit of darkness there, was there? Yeah. As opposed to what the crew you're hanging out with.
Exactly. She's like loves
Morris
Hitler and thinks Morris is it. So anyway, that was a weird moment in things.
Jesus.
Now, while this is all happening, there were 3 parties given that were the big events. So they were given by sort of the 3 key Nazi bureaucrats below Hitler at the time who were all jostling for power. That was Van Ribbentrop, who we mentioned earlier, who becomes the foreign minister. There's Hermann Göring and Goebbels. So they're the 3 that are all competing to who can have the best party. Right? Now, Ribbentrop was apparently the most boring man anyone has ever met. So he throws a party, but it's just at his villa, and it's just lots of champagne, basically, and hors d'oeuvres, and that's it.
Party
so
101.
It's Party 101. And everyone said, oh, that was nice. He was first off the rank, but they were all looking at what the other one was doing to try and beat them.
Yeah.
So Hermann Göring goes next, and of course Hermann Göring had about every title. He was head of the Luftwaffe, he was head of all sort of things he had something like 60 titles, and he used to dress up a lot. He was a very odd man, Hermann Göring, and he had a garden party in the Reich Aviation Ministry with fairground attractions, right? It had heralds and fanfare playing musicians clad in medieval garb. It had ballet artists from the State Opera perform a dance. There was a sealed off section they suddenly opened up to show a complete miniature reconstruction of a famous village replete with a hotel, post office, bakery, a shooting range, a mill, a river steamboat, fairground stands and a carousel. And then Göring walks out in a white sort of fantasy uniform with diamond rings, and he climbs up on a white horse and rides a merry-go-round.
That's what I did at one of my parties.
I was about to say, this has got Mick Malloy party. Göring finds out that Eleanor Holm, the swimmer who wasn't allowed to swim because of her various... Remember, she got drunk on the boat over.
My favourite.
Your favourite. Eleanor Holmes is at his party.
She said she's reporting now.
She's reporting and she's not swimming. So she's there and he finds out.
She had a couple?
And she'd had a lot, I think. And he comes and he summons her over and chats to her for a long chance. And he decides to give her a medal, which is, he always loves lots of medals. He has lots of jewellery, Göring. And he has one where it's a silver swastika. Made out of silver and everything, very expensive. And he pins it on her collar and says, this is yours to keep. And she wrote later, I had so much fun. I enjoyed the parties, the Heil Hitlers, the uniforms, the flags. Göring was fun. He had a good personality. So did the one with the club foot, which is Goebbels. Right. So she's having the time of her life, and she's got this silver swastika brooch that she's wearing around now. The US sprinter Helen Stevens, who'd won the 100 metres gold and the female one, she was not African-American, like Jessie Owen, so the Nazis quite liked her because she looked very Aryan to them. She met Göring during the games and he said, why don't you come to my party? And she goes, okay, I've never had beer before. And he said, oh, well, you'll have your first beer ever with me. So she went along, and at the party, Goring said, "Come see me upstairs." And she walked in, and they went past this soldier guard in the door, and inside she was confronted with Goring sitting on a huge couch with two women in skimpy clothing, and he offers them all wine, including her. But then the telephone rang and something urgent comes, and she was hurried out by the officer at the door and said, "You need to go." Yeah, I think it was like something like important. And she said, as she looked back, Goring stood and said goodbye and blew her a kiss. This is not her weirdest interaction with a Nazi official.
What?
She met Hitler.
Okay.
And she said, and this is her words, he comes in and gives me the Nazi salute. I give him a good old-fashioned Missouri handshake. Once more, Hitler goes for the jugular vein. He gets hold of my fanny and begins to squeeze and pinch and hug me up. As he said, "You're a true Aryan type. You should be running for Germany." So after that, he gave me the once over and a full massage. He asked me if I'd like to spend the weekend with him. She refused.
Jesus.
So she's had quite the Olympics.
Handsy
Hitler. So I saw it written up in one paper as the Fuhrer grabbed my ass.
Wow. That's the tabloid version.
Yeah. So Goring's party goes off the rails. It's very big and glamorous. So Joseph Goebbels, who's the last, goes, "I got to outdo Goring." So he transforms. He gets a small island in the River Havel, which is southwest of Berlin, and turns the whole island into an exotic fairy tale realm. Right. To get there, he has a company of army engineers build a pontoon bridge to get there so they can just walk across. Once you get there, there are thousands of girls dressed as pages in all white to show you to your party. There are butterfly-shaped lamps everywhere and all the treetops everywhere, like it's things. In the centre of the island is a clearing where the proper party is, and there's all the tables and there's rivers of wine that you can just dip your glass into, a menu of all these courses. It costs 320,000 Reichsmarks, which is, if you work it out, it meant out for the 2,700 guests, it's a worker's yearly wage at the time.
Wow.
Paid for every guest. The high point of the evening of his is he puts on a gigantic midnight fireworks display that goes for half an hour.
What?
Non-stop. And apparently it actually goes for so long and is so big and is so loud that it actually kind of doesn't work because it terrifies people, reminds them of an artillery battery.
Yeah, sure.
Batter a barrage.
It's too much.
It's too much, but that's his one. So that's all going absolutely nuts. In the rowing, Hitler shows up to watch his two favourite rowers, Willy Cadell and Joachim Prisch, and they are expected to win, right? And during the heats, the British pair of Jack Berriford and Dick Southwood, they notice the Germans are getting flying starts. And they kind of can't figure out why. And then they realise that they're starting to do a couple of strokes before the race has started. The starter says, ready, set, go. And they're sort of starting to, they're starting to already do a couple of strokes and get a lead.
Well, you can't be doing that.
Well, the reason the German pair had noticed that when the starter lifts their megaphone to his mouth, he can't see the field. So they've picked this up and they're going, well, we can just start. He won't know if we've started or not because it wasn't as sophisticated as now.
I got you.
So the British pair are outraged by this, but they decide to keep it quiet. They win their two heats. Yes. And then when it's time for the final, they just do the exact same thing and beat them and win gold in front of Hitler.
Man, that's not going to...
Hitler then goes to the swimming, and there's a 43-year-old Carla de Vries and her husband George, who are from America. He's a milk baron.
Right.
Made his money in dairy. And she's focused on one goal, and she just wants to meet Hitler. So she keeps saying over and over again, I'm so excited, and sighing. And George couldn't care less and just shrugging like, my wife's an idiot. And Carla, when Hitler enters the swimming and goes to his seat, she leaves her seat and heads towards him. No one stops her. And she gets close and she gets out of her handbag a camera and takes an image of Hitler giving an autograph. Still no one gets in her way. So then she approaches Hitler and asks her to sign her admission ticket. And he says, sure. So he starts signing it. And she's so excited, she's hopping from foot to foot. And the security starts to go, this woman's a bit strange. Yeah. And then she suddenly leads over, grabs Hitler by each cheek and tries to plant a kiss on his lips. And he turns his head at the last minute. But she kicks him, and the whole audience goes nuts.
Yeah.
And starts cheering her as she walks back to her seat. Her husband is like so embarrassed. And Hitler takes it apparently in good humour. But the media do not mention it the next day because it's a breach of security.
Okay.
Because they're like, how did this woman just
you
walk up?
You can't touch when it comes to the Fuhrer.
Yeah, it gets that close. So on the second last day, that night in the Olympic Stadium, Hitler hosts a military tattoo where he marches and displays all three arms of the German military and their might, which when you think about it, at the Olympic Stadium for Peace, holding a military rally the night before, shows you.
It's mixed signals.
There was no surprise really coming out of this. It came to the last ceremony of the night, on the actual closing ceremony, Ballet Latour, the IOC president, thanks Hitler and the Germans with deepest gratitude and said, "We will see you all in 1940 in Tokyo." They turn the Olympic flame off and it dies, and 100,000 people stand in silence for a long minute. Now, and that is the official end of the Berlin Olympics.
Yep.
What they all didn't know, that Hitler knew there and then at the closing Olympics that he was going to war. He knew this at this point. In fact, Albert Speer his architect, had been asked to design a stadium next that could accommodate 400,000 people.
Right.
And Hitler came to view it in Speer's office, and they talked about it, and Speer sort of said, well, we've just had the Olympics. It's going to be a while till we have the next Olympics. And he also said, you also got to remember, he said to Hitler, the way this is designed, the track and field area doesn't confirm with the IOC's official measurements. Right. And Hitler said, don't worry about that. After Tokyo, every games will be in Germany, and we will decide the measurements. So he knew 100%.
Wow.
And he said to Speer, have it ready and completed by 1945. Confident. Wrong. Now, people often say this was Jesse Owens defeating the Nazis, but no one perceived it as that at the time because Germany came top of the table with 89 medals to 56. 33 of them were gold. America came in second with 24. This was seen at the time as a huge success to Germany and a huge success in Hitler's eyes of white supremacy.
Yeah.
Because they came top. So now we kind of all point to Jesse.
That's not my memory of it, is it? That they were runaway.
They were runaway victors, Germany, with an all-white, non-Jewish team. So Hitler saw it as proof. Job done. And so did a lot of the world. 3.8 million spectators came, the biggest ever. It was the start of the modern real era. It really came away that people came away with a real sense of the Germans had done a great deal. A couple of Australians said, Doris Carter, who was a high jumper, Australian, she said, some saw through it all. She said, it was very obvious Hitler was preparing for war. We heard that Hitler could travel from the Reich Chancellery to the stadium via tunnel. We walked through tunnels from the dressing rooms to the arena. All these were prepared for air raid shelters for the Berliners if needed.
Right.
So some of them are real, and there's a bunch of others. Another one, Australian swimmer Pat Norton, said that the uniforms of all the Nazis were very forbidding to see for the first time. And she said that basically it was very obvious that they were getting ready for war because everyone was in military uniforms. Many others did not at all. Most newspaper accounts were very positive towards Germany. The New York Times said that it had put Germany back in the fold of nations and made the Germans more human again. One journalist for the LA Times wrote, From the sun-bronzed blonde Fräuleins to the suburbs, to the highest government officials, including the Führer Adolf Hitler himself, all the ladies and gentlemen of the German capital have put a new meaning into the word hospitality and set up a new Olympic record for official and unofficial parties. So they're getting glowing things.
He's got everything he wanted out of this.
He got everything he wanted. Everyone basically said, Avery Brumбridge, the head of the American and Olympic Committee, said the Berlin Games were the best ever. And he said later on, we can learn much from Germany. We too, if we wish to preserve our institutions, must stamp out communism. We too must take steps to arrest the decline of patriotism. He even concluded in his personal notes, an intelligent, beneficent dictatorship is the most efficient form of government. Observe what happened in Germany for 6 or 7 years in the 1930s. So he wrote that. He goes on to become Olympic president.
Of course he does.
And in fact, basically they dull the opposition to Hitler, the Olympic Games. So they actually buy him the time and a lot of the opposition. So they work perfectly
public relations
for him.
tick.
Huge tick. Afterwards, remember we said that the captain Wolfgang Fernster, who was the captain of the Olympic Village but got demoted to second in charge because he was Jewish? 2 days after the Olympics end, he is dismissed from military service completely because of his Jewish ancestry. So they sack him on the spot. And he goes back to his house and shoots himself. And this is the beginning of the end, really, of the good behaviour of the 2 weeks almost straight away. They do not waste any time.
Just straight back into it. Yeah.
Brundage, forgetting the Germans letting this go ahead and making sure it happens, eventually becomes president of the IOC in 1952 and lasts there for 20 years till 1972. During his first marriage, he fathers 2 sons out of wedlock with his Finnish mistress, Lilian Dresden, and she was just one of many. He acknowledges them privately, but does everything to cover it up and doesn't stay in much contact with them for long afterwards. He is also the one that decides after the 1972 Munich Games, they must continue after the terrorists attacked the Israeli teams. And his track record is another episode because he... never receives any punishment. Louis Zamperini, the guy who went and stole the flagpole, the nuts at the flagpole, he had an astonishing life. He reflected that ruefully had shaken hands with Hitler, the worst tyrant the world had ever known. He said Hitler was like a dangerous comedian, was how he described him. Kind of this odd folk, he said. Yeah. He served as a bomber pilot in the Pacific during the Second World War and spent 47 days on a life raft in shark-infested water and was taken prisoner by the Japanese. He was believed dead. His parents collected his life insurance, and then he returned home to the surprise of everyone. Henri de Ballet-Latour, in 1941, the IOC president, Germany invaded Belgium, and his wife thanked Hitler for bringing Nazi ideology to Belgium. And he died of a heart attack in 1942, and his funeral was attended by leading Nazis, and Hitler sent a wreath with the swastika on it.
Yep.
Theodor Lourdes, who was the Jewish guy that they put up as the front, he was told to quietly resign after the war.
Yep.
Karl Diem, the second in charge, he actually became almost a full Nazi. In March 1945, as the Red Army were closing in on Berlin, he staged another event in the Olympic Stadium. He addressed a rally of thousands of teenage Hitler youth and exhorted them to defend the capital to the death in the spirit of the ancient Spartans. And over 2,000 of those boys would go on to die defending against the Red Blood, completely unnecessary. He is never punished and becomes a respected historian of sport in Germany in the years after.
There you go.
Holm, Eleanor Holm, the glamour girl who never played, she goes on to act in Tarzan movies, gets married a second time to a guy who's Jewish, and so she presents him with Hermann Göring's swastika, which he has changed into a Star of David. So she just swaps.
Wrapped with that.
She lives till she's 90, dies in 2004. Now to finish off, in 1976, Jesse Owens is finally honoured for his performance in Berlin by President Gerald Ford, who presents him with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honour a civilian can receive. Ford said it was one of the great athletic appearances of all time. He dies of lung cancer in March 1980. His friend Long, who he became great friends in the high jump, had already by that point been dead 37 years. He was drafted into the German military and was killed in the Battle of Sicily in July 1943. Among the millions to die in the Holocaust were 11 athletes from the 1936 Olympics. And that is the story of the Berlin Olympics.
It's an epic story, one a forewarning of what was to come. All the elements were there. All the characters were on deck. They threw a good party.
And that was about it.
You know, if they hadn't have gone the route they did, it would have been fun to be.
I think that
at the top end of the Nazi party, they had it. They could literally do what they want.
I think that's what they did do, and that's why a lot of people got sucked in, because as long as you weren't Jewish, if you were white, it was fun. But then the rest of the time, it was one of the most horrific events, and really the Berlin Olympics was the cover that gave them the breathing space to let them do what they go on to do.
Fascinating, top shelf, well done, Titus O'Reilly.